if you want to record your screen, right, as you work on something, you can say you can share the screen. I'll say the entire screen, and I'll minimize this. So now it's recording my screen. Okay. All right. So it's a cheap way to record anything you do and post it online and then share it with anyone. All right. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? Okay, I believe I've invited everybody to Piazza. I invited the last person today. Anyone else doesn't have access to Piazza? If you don't have access to Piazza, please see me after class, and I'll send you an invitation to Piazza. Right? All the slides, any resource, videos, code, source code will be available through Piazza. So Piazza is the place to get everything started. Also, the website, Professor Rosala's website, is also a resource that you should consider taking a look at. It's it has links to everybody else's, to all the other students in this class. You can see what they're doing, right? You can see the experiments that they're working on to get some idea. You can look at projects from past semesters and get an idea on what is our expectations. You can also from here. You can take a look at you can get the essential files I mentioned last class. If you click on the essentials file, it'll take you here, and basically it's just a link that allows you to download a zip file. It's just a zip file, right? It's a Visual Studio ASP.NET project website that you can open up in Visual Studio. By now, you should all downloaded Visual Studio, tried it out, and run it on your machine. If you are using a Mac, by now you should have perhaps installed a VMware or something like that, a virtual machine where you can run Visual Studio. And you download the zip file, the essential zip file, and you unzip it somewhere where you know you're going to find it. I've unzipped it at the root, right? It's the essentials file. It comes out. Mine, I had downloaded it here, essentials.zip. There it is, and then I unzipped it to my C drive. There it is. If you open it up, it's just it's a ASP.NET project, which you can open up with Visual Studio. All right, let me close this. Close. So to open it, you would go in Visual Studio, say File, Open, and it's just a website. And you navigate to where it is, Essentials, and you open it up. Turn off. Okay, so in here, you'll find quite a few directories. Blog, CSS, database, error, expandable, file view, and whatnot. There's quite a few directories in here. Most of them are part of several tools that Professor Rosala has been working on for quite a while. These are directories that allow us to keep track of your progress. Right? What have you been working this week? What are the latest files you've uploaded? You know, what's going on? So don't touch them. Don't touch these directories. They allow us to help us to grade you, right? So please don't touch them. Instead, create other directories like the experiments directory. You're going to be working on experiments all semester long, right? So create a directory in there, and perhaps create a subdirectory there, depending on the topic that you're going to do experiments on. You know, so maybe you're going to do experiments in HTML, create an HTML directory and whatnot. Also, you might want to create a directory called project, and that's where you're going to put all your files for your projects in there. Okay. If you execute this, project, it starts off with this default.aspx over here. Okay. It starts off IIS, and it runs the default ASPX, right? Again, this file, most of it you can blow away, right? Just remove most of this, except the links up there. You see the links up there? Those links, you can move them around, you can style them, you can put them at the bottom, on the side, wherever you want, right? But leave the links in this first page, right? These links allow us to visit your website and take a look at all the experiments you've been working on, keep track of your project, any files you've uploaded. It's the tools that we use to gauge your progress. Okay, so move them around, put them somewhere, but leave them so that we can still get to them. All right. Everything else, right? Any other text there, you can just blow away. And the intention is that you would style this, to be your personal landing page, right? Something that you would feel proud of. To put it on a resume, right? That perhaps you can send a link to a recruiter that says, "Hey, check this out, right? This is all the things I've been working on." So you should spend some time really scanning this page and making it look very professional. Okay. Plus, in addition to these links up here, you would also add links to your experiments and links to your project, right? So that when we click on experiments, we can start just going through all your experiments. Make sense? And if you want to view the project. Oh, a third link that you might want to put in here also is documentation of your project. Right? So the deliverables are, right, half of your grade is going to be your experiments, right? And half of your grade is going to be your project. And part of the project will be documenting your project. Yes? Documenting the project means you're going to tell us, what your project does, right? What was the original problem you were trying to solve? What solution you're proposing, right? What technologies you're using? What technology stack? Where's the source code available? If it's being hosted at GitHub or wherever, right? What's your database schema looks like, right? What are the tables you use? Your fields? How are they related? Perhaps also a class diagram. Yes. Also the main features, and you explain all these features, how to use them. Presumably based on use case, some use case initial use case analyses of what for your project. Yes, all right. So that's the project. Also, the experiments. I would expect that you would be doing experiments every single day, right? Except this week, right? This week we don't have the environment set up. Right? Hopefully by the end of the week you will have the environment set up, and you can start creating experiments next week. Right? You should be all set for starting experimenting next week. So I would do an experiment every single day, perhaps not on weekends. But that's what 5 experiments a week. That's 10 weeks of experiments, right? So that would be what, 50 experiments? And the last 2 or 3 weeks, no experiments. Typically the last month, I assume that you would be focusing only on completing your project. Okay. The last week of classes, we're not going to have a class. We're just going to have we're going to be grading your class projects. If you need to last minute something, your project is not working, please look at it. It's working on my laptop. It's not working on the server. Take a look at it. That week is for those contingency plans, right? Grading and contingency plans. What else? So the experiments are very important. Remember, the experiments are half your grade. Okay. And the intention would be that you would first do the experiments on whatever topic you choose. Again, this is a project course. It's very open-ended. Some students are taken aback that there are no assignments, no structured assignments. It's this kind of like choose your own adventure. And a good place to start might be the things that we work on in class, perhaps, right? Your first experiment might be to replicate what we did in class, perhaps, yes? Which has little value, only the value that you feel comfortable that you can replicate at least what we did in class, right? You understand what we did in class. And then there's the second, third, and fourth, and fifth experiments for that week. You would build on that and make it more complex, right? The idea would be that you would have a project in mind, something you want to build, yes, and you don't know how to build that, and ideally you'd say, well, I want to make it responsive. Okay, so how do you do things responsive, right? So let me learn responsive design, yes? So you would do all the experiments first. Once you feel comfortable with those experiments and having learned about that technology, you would then go to your project and apply those things, right? What oftentimes happens is that students, they're working on their project and they try this and try that, and this is not working. Why is this not working? Let me try this, let me try. And they get it to work, right? And they learned a lot getting it to work. But all those trials and errors, right, of this worked and that didn't work, and why this and why that, all those are all legitimate experiments, okay? Those are all legitimate experiments. This worked, this does not work, right? Why did it work? So the experiments, what I'm asking you to do is that your experiment should be the documentation of you having learned all those things that you try to, right? So first, you do all your experiments, and this works and that didn't work. Why, if you set it up this way, it works. If you set it that way, it doesn't work. All those things, do the experimentations first, and then once you feel comfortable, move that learning knowledge and you apply it to your projects. That makes sense? If you follow that, 5 experiments is nothing. I would expect that you might have 10 experiments at the end of the week, right? Because you are incrementally and progressively trying different things, and that's part of your learning process. Make sense? Right? Yes.
Experiments are not necessarily separate from the experiment website, right? And you might have a bunch of experiments on the same experiment website.
Presumably, you would break them up into individual ones, right? So, for instance, in HTML, you might have 10 experiments on HTML, right? Or for that particular topic. No, the blogging is for you documenting what you did this week, right? You don't document your experiments in the blog. It says this week I tried out HTML, and maybe you put links to the various experiments, to look at the documentation of each experiment. You click here and you go to that particular experiment. In the experiment, you document everything, right? In your code for the experiment, you might have, I don't know, 100 lines, of which 10, right, are the crucial lines, right, that got it to work. It's really, right, the crucial part of the experiment, right? That piece of code, you put it as your documentation of your experiment, right? This is what I was trying to do. I tried this didn't work, and a snippet of code. I tried this, another snippet of code, and this worked, right? And then links to the source code. Right? So if you want to look at the source code, click here, and you look at the entire source code. But the experiment is, perhaps. So let's look at the anatomy of an experiment, right? So you might have under the experiments directory, experiments directory. You might have experiments for HTML, right? And under here, you might have. I wanted to learn about semantic. Semantic tags, right? So I might call it semantic.html, right? And then I wanted to learn about forms. And then I wanted to learn about uploading a file. Right? Whatever, right? All the various things. Yes. Under CSS, you might have other experiments, right? I wanted to know how to do floats, right? And I wanted to learn how to do background images, BG images, HTML, right? And you have various experiments, yes? Right, perhaps one topic per week, say, okay? And at the end of the week, you have at least 5. If you follow what I'm saying, perhaps at the end of the week, you might have 10 experiments, usually, right? Very small, right? Very targeted to learn a particular issue about semantic tags, right? And then for semantic, in each one, right? Can I record here? Let me see. Can I stop screen sharing? And can I switch the camera? How do I switch the camera? So that turns off the camera. And that turns on the camera. How do you switch the camera? On the left? No, here? Here? This one? Cameraman? No, that's not it. Draw. Settings. Camera, live cam. Front. There it is. There we go. So I guess you can see what I'm drawing, at least. Can you see? All right. Anyway, so the can I move this? So each one of these could follow the following anatomy, right? You could have a title at the top, right, of explaining perhaps a paragraph, explaining what it is that you tried to do. The actual experiment. So here's you click here and something animates or whatever. You click here and the whole thing collapses, and you can drag and drop things or whatever the actual experiment is, right? And down below is the documentation. So you might have documentation, right? And then a blurb, perhaps a piece of code, blurb, some piece of code. Yes? Right? And then at the bottom, you can have references. And then at the bottom, you can have a section called code. And you have links. Links to your .html, any .css that you're using, any JavaScript that you're using, any ASPX that you're using. So this is especially important if you're hosting your source code elsewhere, right? I believe a lot of you want to do some mean stack development, and the source code has to live on a. I mean, we can't do mean stack on our servers here. You need to host it on either an OpenShift or Heroku or some other server. We can't host it on our servers. And so the source code is going to live somewhere else, right? It's not going to live on our machine. So that's that's especially important if you're going to do mean stack development, that this links to the original file, right? Or the JavaScript or whatever to where that you need for the experiments to work. That makes sense? So the anatomy of an experiment, okay? A title, the actual experiment, documentation, some snippet of code that is relevant. Out of this, you might have, I don't know, hundreds of lines of code. A lot of it might be boilerplate code, right? It's all the same code, same header, same whatever, right? But and there might be 10 lines of code that are very, very important for us to know that are relevant to this particular experiment. Yes? That makes sense? All right. Let me go back. All right. Let's see. Let me, okay, Visual Studio. Right, so that's my default page. So today's topic that I want to talk about is HTML. I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with HTML, so I'm going to point out only those things that are, well, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we have a initial working knowledge of HTML. And also like to point out some new things that you might not be as familiar with about the new tags and attributes in HTML5. Okay? All right. Let's see. So I want to learn about HTML, and this was yesterday for the undergrad class. Let me stop that. So this is and I'm going to add another directory here, and I'm going to do here. This is 5610, And these are the experiments for 5610. And I'm going to create here add folder, and this is HTML. And for HTML, I'm going to create a in here. I'm going to create a hello world. I'm going to say add HTML page 000 hello. Okay. The only reason I added the numerals is that because I'm going to have several. I want to make sure that they sort in order. All right. You don't have to. So I'm just going to put here just hello world and say h1 hello world. All right. And if I run this, there it is. So it's working, right? It's working. It's slow. It's working locally on my machine, right? Ideally, by the end of this week, right, you will be able to run this on your machine. Yes, you have the environment working on your machine, and you will have uploaded the environment to the remote server, right? Net4. Okay. The way you do that is you'll need to install an FTP client. I installed FileZilla, right? And in FileZilla, I opened up a site manager. I created a new site, and I use the SFTP. This is the host, SFTP development.css.neu.edu, right? That's the host. The protocol needs to be SFTP, not FTP. It's SFTP, right? FTP will not work, right? Then logon type is normal, so that you provide your username and password, right? So your username will be ccis-windows / your username. Okay, this is a username that you use when you applied for a CCIS account. Okay, all right, and then the password that was given to you. All right. Once you do that and you say OK, and you connect, connect. On the right-hand side, you'll see. You'll see a directory. You will see a directory called saying v4.0. Yes, right. In that directory, what you need, I have other versions because this is from past semesters. So in this directory, initially this directory will be empty. Okay? All right, so you navigate to that directory. Once you're inside of v40, right? From the left-hand side, you're going to drag in, right, the content of your essentials file. Yes? Right? Your essentials directory. So let's go here to, I'm already in essential, right? So you go to, I was at C, right? Don't drag the essentials directory in. Don't do that. Go into the essential directory. Once you're inside of the essential directory, select the whole thing and just move it over. Yes? Okay. Once you do that, which I already did, right? So this content over here is the same content as this over here. Yes? Until you don't move it over, it's not published. It's only in your local machine. Yes? Always assume that your local machine is the latest version. Right? Don't assume that it's because it's online. You're gonna if it's lost, right? You always have the remote. Make sure that your local copy, it's always the latest copy. Right? So do all your development locally on your machine, and when it works locally, you move it over. Okay. So for instance, what did I do? I created that hello world. Right? Where did I put it? It's in my experiments. There it is. 5610. I just created that directory, didn't I? Right? And in there's my HTML, my hello world. There it is. Right? So this 5610 is a directory that is not here. Right? Actually, I renamed this, right? I renamed this. This is HTML 4550, and I'm going to move my new folder, which I just created. I'll move it over, and now it's published. Right? Now, if I go to my online, right? I'm going to say net4 net for JGA. Right, so this is the same default ASPX file that I have on my machine. And under there, I have experiments, right? I just created an experiments. Then I have, what is it? What did I call it? 5610. So 5610. Under there, I have HTML, and under there, I have 000.hello. There it is. That's hello world, right? Okay, so now this is deployed remotely on the remote server. Make sense? All right. Okay. One of the first things you should do is to modify your default page to include a link to your experiments. Right. So, for instance, we might add a link here that says experiments. Okay, and it goes into the experiments directory. Right, it's going to go into the experiments directory, right? And in the experiments directory, there's going to be here. Maybe I'm going to put a default page here, maybe an index page, index.html. And in here, why is this not zooming? There we go. I'll say that these are experiments, and I'll say H1 experiments. Okay. I'll deploy that. Let's see. Experiments. There is my index page. Yes. I'll drag it over. I'll go back up, and I'm going to update my default. I'll move on my default over. Override it, yes. Always use this action, yes. I always want to override it. If I go back and I go to my root folder, JGA, there's my new link that I just created called experiments, yes. And I can click there, and there's my landing page for my experiments. From here, I can create links to all the other experiments. Make sense? All right. So hopefully by the end of this week, you will at least have this page up and running. Okay. No experiments this week. The homework is to get the environment up and running under the remote machine. Yes. The TAs. At the end of this weekend, they're going to start looking and visiting everybody's website, yes, and making sure that indeed it's up and running. Okay? All right. Is everybody all set with the CCIS account? Anybody doesn't have a CCIS account? Okay, so make sure to see me after class. All right, anybody else? All right, see me after class, please. All right. Okay, so let's actually talk about the topic. I strongly encourage you to visit Professor Rosala's website. It gives you links to everybody else, to his site, my site. Notice that it's this one, right? That's my site which I just created, right? Also, the websites for the teaching assistants and all the links to all the students. Make sure that you come here and that your name is listed here. Okay. If your name is not listed here, there's no way that they will be able to start grading you. Right? You won't get credit for work that you're doing. Okay. All right. Okie dokie. All right. Let's see. Okay, so for today's topic, let's talk about HTML. All right, so let's. I have a couple of slides. They're mostly as a cheat sheet for me to remember not to miss something, a particular topic. Let me make this big. And okay, so HTML5. So as you might already know, right? HTML has a has a history, right? That I think we went over that. Tim Berners-Lee came up with the invented HTML and the World Wide Web to share documents very easily. This is the latest iteration of HTML5 of HTML, and it's a version that finally recognizes the fact that we're building applications, right? We're building we're building user interfaces that are meant to be very interactive. They're meant to be provide a rich user experience. All sorts of controls, for selecting dates, for selecting all sorts of types of data. And we want to strongly type the data, right? Things that you would typically do this in JavaScript, that make sure that an email is an email, that a telephone is a telephone, that a date is a date. These things that usually would have needed to use a plugin or some kind of extension are now a standard, are part of the standard, right? The HTML standard. So I'd like to explore that. This is the minimal HTML document, right? Actually, this is a little. There's typically you also want to put here the language. English. Okay. The doc type is changed, right? It's just right now. It's just doc type. HTML doesn't have a version. You have the HTML tags that wraps the entire document. You have the head and the body. In the head, you have things that are meta information about the document, right? The title tag is required. Right? In here, you should insert something that, it's a very concise sentence that says something about your site. Do not misuse it by putting there, search strings or search to optimize your search engine, right? For search engine optimization. Instead, just very concise, explain what it is, right? And this title is what appears at the top of the browser, right? And then in the body is where you put the main content. All right, there are some new elements. Also, just before we get there, notice that I'm using indentation, right? So for instance, you have the HTML tag, the outer HTML tag is the parent of the head tag and the body tag. You see that? And to make it easy for us to read that, we have an indentation. You should also apply this. If you don't apply good practice, the TAs will let you know. We'll say you're not indenting, you're not using proper white spacing, the camel casing is wrong or whatever, right? And you're supposed to go back and fix it. Please be very responsive to your TAs. If they tell you to go and please fix something, right? Please go and do it, right? We're going to keep track of all these emails, and depending how responsive you were to the TAs and whether they're being very positive in their comments or being negative or whatever, right? And the way you react to that, it will be part of your final grade. Okay, so be very, very responsive to any suggestion that the TAs tell you. Okay, so I don't want to see an email saying, it's been 2 weeks. I keep telling whatever this person, and they're not doing it, right? I don't want to see that. Okay. Let's see. Notice that all the elements are lowercase, right? Notice that all the tags have an opening and a closing. So, for instance, we have an opening body and we have a closing body with a slash. Okay? Inside the tags, we call these elements. Inside of the element, there's the contents, or we call it the body of the element. So, for instance, the meta and the title is the. Why is this jumping so much? It's making me nauseous. Notice that the text insert title here is the body. We call it the body of the title tag. If it has no body, if it has no content, you can still open and close it like the body here. You have opening and closing, but it's optional. You can instead close it by putting a slash at the end. Okay. Make sure to follow all these rules, right? Again, the TAs will look for these things. Okay. They will pass it through a a tool that verifies all these things and points out all the things that are missing. These are some new elements, right? Just like you have all these elements here, the HTML, the head, all these are elements that have been on in the HTML for a while. These are new elements: header, footer, sections, articles, main, aside, and so on and so forth. These are all new, and and they are part of a movement of making the internet or the World Wide Web more meaningful. Okay, just like when you code, right? When you're creating HTML, right? You have an audience, right, that you want to please, right? You're making the page and it looks pretty, right? And that's you're trying to please who? The end user, right? But in this case, because you're developers, you also want to please other developers, right? Like myself and the TAs, right? Which are going to be reading your code, right? Your end user is not going to look at your code, right? But we are. We're going to look at your code. So you have two audiences. Don't forget that you have two audiences. One is your end user, who's going to look and it's pretty and it's pleasant, and you have the other audience too, which is other developers. Okay, we're going to look at it, and the code should be pleasing to read, right? Use nice white spacings, tabs, and whatnot. So these new elements also were introduced because the HTML not only has the end user as an audience, not only does it have other developers as an audience, but your HTML page has a third audience. Okay, third audience is automated algorithms, right? Who else visits your page? Who else sees your page? Not only your end user, right? Other developers, but who visits them? Spiders, right? You have all these Googles and all these search engines trying to parse your website automatically. There's not an end user, right? There's no human being looking at this, right? They're automatically parsing your site and try to make sense out of the content, right? And right now it uses very sophisticated algorithms that they use keywords, right? Since the content in there is mostly for human consumption, right? All the text in there, really you would need some kind of AI, some kind of artificial intelligence to read the document and really understand what the articles it's written for, right? But if you start adding some meaning into your website, right, and say, hey, this is a date, right? This is a time. This is an address, right? This is a street. This is a zip code. This is right. If you start putting meaning to the data, the automated scripts, all these automated processes could extract this meaning, right, and better understand what's going on, right? So there's a movement in the web to start adding meaning to the otherwise textual content, right? Tim Berners-Lee again, invented the web, and he's making a huge push to go back and add add meaning to the content, right? That's a term that it's a topic called semantic web, right? If the web had meaning associated to all this textual information, we could treat the World Wide Web as if it were a database. You could query the web. You could ask it. You could go to Wikipedia and start asking things such as, tell me all the presidents who were born between 1990 and 2000, whose party was a leftist-leaning party and who had a terrorist attack in their second term. Wow, that's like a huge select statement, right? That you're trying to join, lots and lots of different pages of data that is spread over I don't know how many places, right? Right. But if those nodes, those web pages had meaning, right? You could parse it and join all this data and retrieve actual meaningful response, right? We don't have that yet. Tim Berners-Lee is pushing this heavily. These are some semantic elements that we have in HTML. Now, for instance, we have a dedicated HTML element called header, right? This is a header, this is a footer. How do we used to do this before? We used to just use plain old divs, right? Everything was a div, right? And before HTML5, we used divs, and then use an ID or a class and say, hey, this is a header div, right? And this is a footer div, and this is a sidebar div, right? Meaning, we wanted the meaning, right? But the meaning was kind of like indirect. It was an indirect meaning, right, by IDs. Over here, we have dedicated elements, right? We have dedicated elements that say, hey, this is a section, this is an article, this is the main content, this is an aside, this is all the navigational content, right, that allows you to navigate. This is a time, this is a date time, this is a figure, captions, so on and so forth. Okay? So let me come up. Let's do an experiment and let's start using these elements as they should, so you could see a little bit on how to do that. All right. So say we want to create a site where we are listing an article, and that article is has other people commenting on that particular article, right? So let's create a new HTML. Oh, I need to stop this. So let me add a new page here. So this is a blog. This is a blog post. We're looking at one single blog post. Okay. Let me give it a numeral. So 001. Okay. And let me make this a little bigger. Okay. And let's see. Can you all see that? Yes. Okay. And I'm going to make this blog post. Notice that I'm giving the title something meaningful, right? So, okay, in here, typically what will happen is that definitely we want oh, why? And we're going to create first a header at the top, header, and presumably a footer at the bottom. And so these are new semantic elements, right, that used to not be there in the previous version of HTML5, of HTML. Okay. Okay, notice that I'm using spaces for my indentation, right? Don't use tabs. Right? Tabs are evil. So use 2 spaces or 4 spaces. Right? So in your header, you might do something, I don't know, like perhaps actually do an H1. Right? You might say that this is a blog post. Okay? And perhaps add other things in here, right? Some minimal navigational, some small navigational things, such as maybe create a new post, right? Maybe a link here to create a new post. So href blog new HTML. We don't have them one yet. Create new post. Okay. And then you might have down below, you might have another navigational that allows you to jump between various sections of the same documents, right? So maybe you might have various sections. You might have a section for the maybe no, I'm sorry. Instead of a section, this might be a main. If it's the main content, right? Then you can tag it as main. This is the main content of the page, right? So perhaps here is the main posting of the blog post. And perhaps you might have other sections, right, that are not the main section, but there's additional sections to this. So you might have maybe in here you might have a section called for any comments that other users might have. Right, so this is a comments page, a section at the bottom. So let me call this maybe using H2 for the comments. So this might be comments, right? And in that section of comments, you might have several comments in there, right? You know, and each comment might live where? It might live as a different article. It's like a different post, right? It's a different content elements, right? And each article might have its own title, right? Its own header. You could go so far as saying that this is another header inside of the article. You could do that and have an H3 perhaps, right? Maybe it's too much, right? So I'm going to not have a header here. I'm just going to go and say H3. I mean, it depends how normalized you want to be, right? It's the same question when you're looking at databases, right? You're normalizing a database, and well, how normalized do you want to split this into? Does it warrant an entire class or an entire table, right? Maybe it does. Over here, I just decided to just say H3, right? So I'm not telling that this is a header. Perhaps H3 is so small a header that it's not worth even telling the browser that it is a header, right? The H3 might be maybe a title of the comment. So this might be comment 1, and maybe the content of that comment, right? So a paragraph. And where could I add a comment here? Let's grab some content that we could paste in there. We can grab some content from Lorem Ipsum. Lorem Ipsum is has become a standard set of piece of text that is used widely in the printing industry. When they're coming up with a magazine or a newspaper, and they want to lay out the content before you actually have the content, right? They need filler text to put in here. It's a public domain piece of text that you can use. It's I believe it came initially from a poem written by Homer a while back. So we can just copy that. We can just paste it in here, right? Let me run this, see what we have so far. Okay, we have the blog post. We have comment 1 down at the bottom, right? Let me create another comment. All right, so let's see. Let me create another one. Okay, so we have several comments. So comment 1, 1, 2, and 3 at the bottom. There we go. So we have several comments down below, right? For the main content, we can do something similar. So we have in the main content over here. In the main content, you might have something like also several entries of Lorem Ipsum. Oops, sorry. What did I do? Header, blog post, nav, main content. This is the main. Let me copy main Lorem Ipsum again. Copy and paste Lorem Ipsum and several entries of Lorem Ipsum. Yeah, like that. There we go. So we have the blog post, create a new post, and then here's the main content, and down below the comments. Make sense? All right. You might have at the top, you might have a navigational at the top. So you might have maybe you want to be able to jump around, right? So that you can jump right at the bottom or jump at the comments, so you could see. Perhaps if you have several of the same thing, it's usually a good idea to put it inside of a list. So here we have a UL, meaning unordered list, right? And then you have several list items, of which one could be an href that might allow me to jump to my comments section, right? And maybe another entry that might allow me to jump, I don't know, maybe the footer. Okay, so this is maybe the footer. Notice that these are not pointing to outside links, outside pages, but are being referencing other sections in the same page. So they want me to be able to. They're looking for that spot in the. So notice if I hover over this, right? Notice that there's a hash comments at the end, right? But it's the same document. So footer is at the bottom. So we can use an anchor to say that and give it a name. This is the comments section. There it is, right? That allows me to if I click on comments, it takes me directly to the beginning of the main article. And if I do the same to the footer, in the footer I don't have anything. I might have here, copyright, and then maybe a link, name, footer. So now if I click on footer, it tries to go as down as possible, but we don't have any white space below it, so it can't go any further. Right, but notice that it jumped as down as possible. We might have a link to go to the top, right? In the footer, you might have, a link that says href top. Go or top, okay? And maybe you have it also at the at each comment, maybe, right? As you at the bottom of each comment, you might have a link that takes you back to the top, right? Also, at the end of the main content, here's this is the oh wait, this is wrong, right? No, this is the wrong comments. I'm sorry. These are the comments. Sorry. And the top might be, this is the top. We'll call this the top. Okay, let's try this again. So if you jump to the comments, it jumps down to the comments, right? Or you can press top and it goes to the top of the page. Okay, that makes sense? All right. Right. So those are some of the semantic elements. Aside are useful for sidebars, for instance, right? Things that are secondary content, right? That is not the main content. That if you miss it, it's okay, right? You read the main content, right? But if you miss the aside, it's okay, right? If you have enough space to render it in a desktop, okay, render it. The main content plus the aside, and usually they're rendered to the side, right, as a sidebar perhaps. But on a small screen, like a phone, typically those aside are rendered at the bottom, right? So that you read the main content at the top, and as you scroll, if you want to read the secondary content, it's way at the bottom. Okay. Also, navigation. Now that you've listed what are your navigational elements, right? Typically, if you have enough space, yes, I'll show my navigations at the top. But if I don't have space, like in a phone, right, I'll collapse that and put it so that you can toggle it, right? Or maybe I'll put it way at the bottom, right, so that I click at the top and I jump at the bottom to the navigational spot, and then I can jump around with using the navigational links. That makes sense, right? So this gives browsers more leeway or knowledge on how they should render the page and what should they definitely show and what is okay to leave as a secondary content. Make sense? All right. All right. Let's keep going. Let's link here to a blog post to blog new HTML. So that page doesn't exist. Let's create it. That'll give us a chance to play around with some new form elements that were introduced in HTML5. So let's create another one. So actually, I'll link it to 002-blog new. What did I call it? Blog new. Okay, so let's create it. Let's create a new page. Oh, stop it. I'll say new, add HTML. So this is 002-blog new.html. Okay, so in here, okay, so I'm going to call this or post new blog article. Okay. All right, so in here I'm going to have a header, and also I'm going to have a footer. And the main header, I'm going to say maybe H1 new blog post. And in my main content, I'm going to have a form for you to fill out, right? What is it you want to write? So I'm going to have a form. Here's a form. And here I'll have a very quick input field, right? My input field is the simplest control, right? User interface control that allows me to read data from the end user. Yes. So we have input, and by default, the inputs are textual, right? And so let's render that. Let's see. All right, let's go back up. Let's refresh, create new post, block new. Oh, did I refresh? Block new. Did I not? Oh, I didn't save it. Okay, let's see. All right, there we go. All right, new blog post. Yes. All right. So if I click here, I type. If I press enter, notice that the window flickered. You see that? Right. The default behavior is that when I press enter, right, and I'm in an input field that is inside of a form, right, the default action is to submit the form. Right, submit the form where? I never told it where to submit it. So by default, the default behavior is to submit it to the same page. Okay, and we know that it submitted it because it added that question mark at the top. You see that question mark at the last piece of this, right? What this says is that the browser, what it does is that when you see that you're submitting a form, it will gather all the fields, right? It will gather the names of the fields, the values that you typed or you selected in those fields, and it'll create what is called a query string, right? And it'll append it at the end of whoever it's being submitted to, right? In this case, I'm submitting it to myself, okay? But notice that it didn't put anything, right? Where's the data that I typed? Where is it? Okay. The reason it's not there is that I didn't name my field. I never named my field. Let's give it a name. Okay. So blog new. Here we go. So let's give it a name. All right. And let's say that it's an email. If you're going to be posting something, I want you to, perhaps identify yourself, right? And with your email. All right. And so let's refresh this. So then now if I type something, someone at somewhere.com, press enter. Notice that my query string now has been populated. There it is. See that? Email equals someone at somewhere. See that? So that's how data gets propagated from one user interface to perhaps somewhere else. Now, typically what would happen is that this would be submitted to the server, right? The server would receive this data, right, and create an entry in the database, and then come back with a resulting page of that post having been posted. Yes? We don't have that yet. We don't have a server yet. We haven't seen that yet. Sorry. So we're going to be working mostly on the user interface the first couple of weeks. Okay. Let's see. So that's my input. But what if I would have typed something else? Just that. Notice that it just let me submit it, right? Even though I did not type an actual email, right? It let me submit it. So what we'd like to be able to do is implement a policy of quality assurance that is across the entire stack, technology stack, right? When you're validating or making sure that the data is good, you should validate as early as possible and as often as possible. Okay, or as early as possible would be right now when you're submitting, right? Don't bother the server with bad data. Try to validate it as early as possible. So what we could do is right now what's happening is that the default type, right, of the data that I'm selecting here, that I'm typing, is text. That's the default. And notice that when I do this, look at all the different types. Okay, the default is text, right? If I don't say anything, right? So if I leave text, the behavior is the same. If I refresh, it just allows me to submit, right? But I can be a little more strongly typed, right? Just like I do strongly typed on the server, in my Java classes or my C# classes, just like I'm strongly typed in my database, right? I can be strongly typed here as well. I can say that this is of type email. Notice that email is one of the types, right? Now if I reload, right, and I type garbage and I submit, notice that the browser stops me and says, no, I'm not going to let you submit because I want an email, right? It says you don't, what did it say? It says you don't have an @ sign, okay? All right, once I have the @ sign, now it's complaining that, you know, if I submit this, it says you don't have a domain after the @ sign, right? So once you type something, it's not smart enough to know that this is an actual domain or not, right? So I can submit this, and now it lets me go through, right? As long as I follow that pattern. That makes sense, right? All right. So we have some validation. This is validation that we used to need a plugin for this, right? Right. We need to use jQuery to validate that the data type, blah 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 blah, right? Now it's natively supported by the browser, right? What other things? Let's see. Typically, we might also want to give a hint to the user of what it is that we want them to type. Okay. Well, again, we would need to do one way of doing it is to give a title, like for a tooltip, right? So this is when it says, you know, please enter your email. Okay. So if you refresh and now you hover over, you have a tooltip, right? That says some idea. A better solution might be for us to give them an example of what it is that we want them to type. Okay, so something like we could use a new attribute called placeholder. It's a new attribute, HTML5, where you can type something like, you know, someone at somewhere.com. Okay. Now, when you refresh, notice that it adds here an example of grayed out text, right? That gives you an idea of what it is that you're asking for, right? And it's still, you can still type on it. Notice that it's still there until you start typing and then goes away, right? And then when you go back and you leave it empty, it comes back there, right? It's a very nice for user experience, right? For giving you an idea of what it is that you're asking for. Also, typically we want to give them a label, perhaps, right? Maybe on a phone, this is enough, right? We don't have too much space, too much vertical space is enough. But if you have enough space, typically you want to also add what is called a label, right? And you want to say that this is an email, right? So there's a label that's saying, hey, this is what I'm asking for, an email. Now labels, they work along with the input field for which you are labeling, right? It says, what am I labeling? I am labeling that input field, right? They should go together, right? So what happens is that labels should refer to the input field that they are labeling. Okay, notice now that if I click on the email, nothing happens on the label. See that nothing happens, right? What's happening is that every time I click on something, that something gets focus. All right. So for instance, if the label, if the label refers to, well, it needs to be referred to the input field. The way that it refers to is by an ID. You have to identify, right? You have to give it a unique identifier to the field that you want to refer to. So we'll give it an identifier of email. Notice that I am overloading the word email, right? It's the ID, it's the name, it's the type, right? But it has different meanings, right? Email is a type, yes. Also, it's the name of the field. That's how I want it in the URL, right? But I'm saying the ID, and IDs are used for other elements referring to you, right? Somebody's going to refer to me. This is like a primary key, yes. It's like a primary key, and then a label can refer to someone else by saying that this is a label for email. Right, this is like a foreign key, right? Referring to that field over there. That's called by ID. Make sense? Right. IDs is what you would expect, right? They're supposed to be unique, right? They're supposed to be unique. So now if I refresh and I click on the email, notice that the field takes focus, right? Because it's, oh, yes, this is a label for that input field. Okay? Your question? Okay. All right. All right. Another thing that the way we're creating these forms is that typically, depending on the layout, you might want to lay it out vertically or horizontally. In this case, it's being laid out horizontally, right? It's being laid out horizontally. Notice that the text, the field at the header has a new line, right? So the layout seems to be vertical, right? But this label and this input field seem to be horizontal. So why is one being laid out vertical and some are laid out horizontal? It's because some elements are what they're called block elements, right? Meaning that they are they break up the page vertically, right? They add new line, right? A page break, right? And they take up the entire width of the page of whatever window you have. So this new blog over here, notice that it's taking up the entire width of the browser, right? Whereas these over here, okay, these elements, right, such as label, input fields, right? Those are all inline elements, right? They don't add a page break. They don't add any vertical spacing, right? They just flow one after another, right? Until you don't have any more space, any more horizontal space, and then they just start wrapping. Make sense? Right? So some levels, some elements are block, some elements are inline, right? You just have to know which one is which, so that you'll know that a paragraph is a block, right? Just like it says, right? It's a block. Line items are block, right? They add a vertical spacing, things like that, right? But plain text, span, a lot of the formatting elements are also all inline. They just flow. Images are inline, things like that. Okay. Divs are blocks, right? They add vertical spacing. All right. So right now, notice that we're using this by default. It's using the default layout, right? It's just flowing from left to right. Okay. But we might want to force a vertical spacing, right? The easiest way to do it is to use the break elements, right? If I refresh this, notice that it breaks and it's a new line. But this would be a very bad use of the break element, right? The break element is more for breaking, adding new lines. Yes, it's definitely for adding new lines, right? But it's for text that perhaps you might want to write in a single line. But as you're writing in a single line, you might want to add a break. Text break in a single line. Like for instance, like an address, right? In an address, you might say, street 1 break, street 2 break, town break, state and zip break, right? But you might write it in a single line, right? But you want to add these breaks. So this is a bad use of the break. Also because this break always breaks. It's always a break line, right? So this is not giving me the option of laying it out any other way but as a new line, right? So for instance, if it's a desktop, it's okay to have them side by side, right? But if it's a phone, I would like it to go vertical. Right now, I don't have a choice. Break will always do it vertical, right? So instead, what we do instead is not use break, right? We use a div typically, right? A div will add the vertical breaking. So it breaks it, right? It's broken right now. So a div, like the name suggests, it's a division. I'm adding a new section, a generic vertical spacing section, right? I'm not calling it an article. I'm not calling it a section. It's generic, right? I'm only adding it because I want to lay it out. Also, by adding it as a div, right, it allows me to later on, right, style it so that it behaves one way when I have a desktop or another way when I have a phone. Yes? So when I have a desktop, I might choose it to display horizontally, but when it's a phone, it allows me to display it vertically. Okay? But that we need classes, we need CSS, and we don't know CSS just yet. But I'm going to add the div nonetheless. Okay. Also, typically, because these two things that kind of go together, right? And I broke them apart, adding this div. I would like to enforce the fact that these things are together. So I'm adding another div, saying that making sure that these two, the label and the input field, go together, right? They move along together, right? It's a grouping. I'm grouping them. Make sense? All right, that's email. All right, what else? Let's add a couple other things. We saw, I believe we looked at most of the elements, the attributes that I wanted to see. Format, so we looked at the input field. You have all sorts of, we have input types, color, email. We have dates. Let's create dates. So for instance, let's do a new element, a new input field. So I'm going to create and paste it, and this will be the date that is posted. How about that? Date posted. All right. So now what I can do, this is going to be a label, but for date, right? And the idea, I'm going to call it date. The placeholder, we don't put placeholders on dates. Title, please enter date posted. The name will be date. The type will also be date. Okay. Now if I refresh, I notice that it has date posted. Notice that this is a new control, right? Notice that it already gives me a hint on what is it asking for, right? The format by default, it's the local format of your browser. So if you're in Europe, it might be year-month-day, right? If you're in other countries, I don't know what it does. Anybody in Chinese, what would it show? Same as Europe? Okay, all right. So yeah, so it's localized, right? It's localized for your particular locality. Notice that if I hover, right, it says that, hey, there's a widget here, right? There's a widget that when you click on this, right, it gives you an option to select dates, right? Again, this is something that used to take a widget, right, or a jQuery widget to support this kind of feature, right? And now it's natively supported by the browser. And each browser obviously renders this widget differently, right? It's not standard across browsers. It's also supported on the phones, right? So if you visit this on the phone and you select this, it'll give you a date picker, right? So it's smart enough. The phones are smart enough to understand this. HTML5. You can also instead of date, there's another one called date time. Date time is not supported by Chrome. Notice that it just doesn't do anything, right? If a browser doesn't understand or does not support a particular input field or a typical type of field, it just defaults to the default one, which is just plain text. Okay. It does support date time local though, right? Which is more or less the same, right? This version says that I am aware of the locality, right? And I will render it, right, depending on the locality. So if I refresh, this allows me to do both a date and time, right? So I can select a date and I can select a time, 5 p.m. a.m. Again, this will render differently depending on the locality. Right? There's also a time, obviously, but there's also week. You can choose a week posted. I mean, not that we want to keep track of the week, but just to show you. And please enter week posted. And this is the name is week. And the type, right, you can say, and this is a week. There it is, week. If you refresh, notice that it says week. You're asking for the week, and the drop down allows you to select a week. Okay, so you can notice that it highlights the entire week, right? So you can select that one. That's week number 2, right? Or you can just keep to a different month. You select that one. That's week number 30. Okay. There's also, you can select the month, right? So there's certain different widgets that are, again, are natively supported, right? Pretty cool, right? Other input fields that in here are, for instance, being able to. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see what happens when you submit this. To submit, again, you can type something, right? Submit it by clicking on the enter, right? And notice at the top we have the data. We have noticed that for the week, notice the way it captures the week. It says the year 2015, week 30, W30. You see that? For the time, for the date, I didn't pick anything. So let's pick something for the date. The dates in week 5, there it is. So I'm going to submit. Enter, let's see the date that it submitted. There, so that's week 53. That's the year. I mean the date. So this is 2015, blah, 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 time. The T is used for delimiting the date part and the time part. And this is the 1259, and you have this is the encoding for the colon, right? And then you have here for the email, you have the at. This is the at sign. You know, this everything is URL, what we call URL encoded. Okay. Right. Notice that each field. So this is a field. This is what's called it's a parameter. Right. It's called a query parameter. Right. That's a value for the parameter, and then there's an ampersand. Right. So between each name value pair, there's an ampersand that is the delimiter between each name value pair. Everybody can? Yes. I'm sorry? Oh, for the week? Yeah. Yep. Yes, that's uniform. Yep. Right. It's part of the HTML5 standard. Yep. Yeah. This the way the dates are being posted. Right. That's all standard. Let's see what else. All right. So let's do a couple more things. So how about radio buttons? So for instance, you might want to subscribe to the blog, right? So let's create here something very simple here. Div and the label maybe subscribe. Just for time purposes, I'm not going to do labels and something. So I'm going to say subscribe, right? And here I might have I want a radio buttons. The radio button might say yes, no, right? So I'm going to add a break here, and I'm going to say I want to say yes, and so the way we're going to label this, right? We want to label. You're going to have the radio button itself, which is just going to be a circle, right? That you can click on, but then you want the label, right? The label will be either yes, and then the label no, right? We could just say something like this, right? Input type radio, right? Right, just that, like that, right? But typically we want also a label, so something like yes, right? And then another input field for no, perhaps, yes, like that, something like that, right? But notice that oh, you know what we should do? Add here as well. We should add a submit button. So let's add a button here at the bottom. Button type submit, and this says submit or post. Notice that I'm going to put the I'm going to if I say yes and I say post, right? Notice that at the end, right? That subscribe is not being added, right? Why? Because it has no name, right? It doesn't have a name, right? If a field doesn't have a name, it does not add it to the query string. If I click on it, also notice that if I click yes and I click no, they're not mutually exclusive, right? To make them mutually exclusive, you have to give them names. So you say, for instance, the name would be subscribe, right? And you have to use the same name. Now that it's the same name, it knows that they're part of the same data and that they're mutually exclusive, right? So if I refresh this and I select yes, right, and I click no, notice that it's mutually exclusive, right? Now, if I submit, notice that what gets posted, it says subscribe equal on. What does that mean? It means that, yes, it was selected. So, but wait a minute. So regardless of which one I select, right, you'll notice that at the end, it's always subscribe equal on. So there's no way to distinguish between them, right? So the way we can distinguish between them, because the only thing it's saying that, yes, there wasn't a radio button that was selected, right? If I refresh and I submit this without clicking, right, or selecting any one of them, notice that it does not get added to the list. That means that it was off, right? So, but I'd like to be able to distinguish between them. So one way to distinguish is to give them a value, yes, or value, no. Okay. Now when I click on yes and I post, the input field, it says subscribe equal yes, or if I click on no, it says subscribe equal no. Okay? Everybody okay? All right. The value attribute, we can use it for all the other fields as well. If you want to give them a default value, so for instance, for the input field, we could give it a default value of me at here.com. Right, notice that it has a value, right? So it defaults to that value, right? We can also do it programmatically using JavaScript, which we'll do next week. Obviously, if you give it a default value, the placeholder is, well, actually, the placeholder is still true, right? If you remove this, the placeholder is still there, right? What else? Radio. Okay, let's do let's do checkboxes. So, for instance, I might say div, and I want to say categories, maybe categories. I want to subscribe. I want to post this to a particular category. So this might be an input of type checkbox equal checkbox. Name is category, and value equals maybe comedy. No, category. I don't know what should we put in here? Okay, fine. Oh, you know what I forgot to do before? This is my checkbox. But notice that yes, right? You have this label, right? You have the label. One thing that we want to be able to do is again be as semantic as possible and say that this yes and no are not just plain text, right? They are the label for that field. So what we could do is the input, this input, we could wrap the whole thing, and this only is for excuse me. This is only true for radios and checkboxes. We can wrap the whole thing and say this is a label, and inside we have the radio button, right? If we do that, if you click on the label, notice that if there's no label, it's just plain text you can select. But if you hover over this, it's actually part, right, of the field. If you click on it, it takes the radio takes the focus, right? That's also very important for user experience, right? If there's a long piece of text, right, instead of just forcing them to click on just the radio button, right, it's a pain, right? But if you make a large label and they click anywhere, right, and then everything's clickable, it improves the user experience. Make sense? All right, so same thing for no. You can say label. I'm sorry? There we go. I'm not going to do it for the checkbox for time. So comedy. Here we have several of these, maybe comedy, horror. So here's horror. Also, I'm going to move this higher. I'm going to move it at the top, because what happens at the form, when it builds the query string, it puts the values in the order that they were declared in the form. Right? The order really doesn't matter, right? But it does matter to me because I have to scroll all the way to the end to show you. So I'm forcing it to be the first one here. All right, so here's comedy and horror. Now, if I click on comedy and I submit, where's my submit? Post. Notice that the category has a value. See that? It says comedy. There it is, right? But if I select both of them, right, and I do post, notice that the query string, you have categories comedy and category is also horror. You see, you get two elements, two parameters, one for each one of the values. Right, because you can check boxes, you can do one or more, right, or none or more, right? If you don't select, it won't make it to the query string. Okay. A new input field. Say rating. Say we have a yeah, I want to rate the article, maybe, right? Don't use BR. I'm using it here because of time, right? Use the correct layout, right, of divs and whatnot. So there's a new one here that you want to, for instance, you can do input type equal range. That's new. And you can say that the max is maybe 100, and or you know what you want to, or stars. Say stars. Max, you can give it 5 stars. Okay. It's a slider. It renders as a slider, right? And it'll render natively depending on your operating system. So on Safari, it will use the Mac look and feel of sliders, right? And you can slide this, right? You can go up and down 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it has steps, right? So here's the maximum value, right? You can give it a default value of 5 stars. So it by default is 5, or you can say default is 0. So it goes to 0 by default. You can also, instead of using that, you can, if you're asking for a number, a particular number, right? You maybe you want to rate this. You can say, I want a number. I want you to type a number, right? But I want to say that the minimum number you can give me is a 0, and the maximum is a 5, and no value, no initial value. Although you could give it a value. But notice that rate now. Notice that when I hover over it, it gives me the ability of adding numbers, right? And I can't go lower than 0, and I can't go higher than 5, right? But if I type 7 and I try to submit this, right, it'll not let me. Right? It says no, it has to be below 5. Right, so it's strongly typed. Okay, another one, a nice new one, is the ability of doing progress, like a progress bar, right? Where, for instance, if you know, maybe you people are filling out a profile, right? And depending on the profile, you know, so how far have you gotten to your profile, right? So you can do input type progress. Oh no, wait. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's called progress. Sorry, progress. And you know, the maximum is 100%, but you have only completed 30% of your profile, right? So it renders as a progress bar, right? Depending on your browser, Safari will render using the Mac look and feel. Okay. What else? Another one that's pretty interesting is. That's very useful is you know, being able to select things from a drop down, right? So for that we can use the select, and the select you can give it various options. So for instance, you know, like the category, or genre. Here's genre. So we say name, genre, genre. So this is maybe it's rock, or you want classical, country, and maybe new age. So this allows you to drop down and select any elements, and when you submit, notice that it's there. See, genre equal classical. right? Now this it's what's between the option, right? That's what the user sees. That's the label, right? What the user sees. But the data that gets submitted, right? You might want it to be different, right? Maybe it should be a constant that is more readable or parsable by whoever's going to process this, right? So you might want to give it a value, right? Maybe all caps, for instance. You know, something like value equal classical, right? Or value. So maybe these are enumerated data types, right? In your object model, right? So you can give it actual data that your object model is expecting, country, or this one's value equal new underscore age, right? So this is more computer friendly data, right? So if you refresh, you select classical and you submit, notice that now it uses the more computer the actual value, right? But you still have the human readable format. Make sense? Another one that is also very useful, that is you know, it's for new applications, like drop downs where that can give me like an autocomplete, right? Where I still have a drop down where I can select from any number of values, but I can always submit something else, right? So for instance, I could do it this other way, some other way, like genre. Instead, I could do what's called a data list, right? That has a name. No, wait. ID, is it? ID. And the ID is genre. I'll say genre too. And in the data list, I can have options in here that might be, again, rock. And I might have a classical. I might have country and dance. Okay, and then the data list can be referenced from an input field of type what is it? I forget. What is it? Oh, hidden image, radio, submit range, number, hidden file, email, date. Where are you? Date, email, file, hidden, range, research, submit, search, text. What? Is it not supported? Isn't it list? And no, it's not list. Data list? Data list? And oh, not type. It says you say list equal genre 2. There it is. There it is. Okay, so now notice that we still have a drop down. You have a drop down, right? And you click here, and you can still select, right? Or you could type something else, right? So this gives you like a combo box, right? A combination between an input field and a drop down, right? So you could still submit something else that is not in the list, right? But you can always select and replace it with something that is in the list. Okay. Right. Something else that I wanted to show you right before we leave. Some of these comments, right? Something that you also need a plugin usually that is now supported natively in HTML5 is that say you have some of these comments, right? This content perhaps that or some content that you want to be like optional, right? That you only want to see it if you explicitly click on something, right? Like a toggle show and hide, right? Typically you need a plugin for that, right? Well, it's such a common use case, right? That again, HTML5 identifying the fact that we're creating these applications has made it now natively supported. So you can now have a new element called details, right? That if you have text in here, maybe from Lorem Ipsum, right? Right. By default, details. Why are you? What don't you like here? What are you missing? Oh, it wants a summary. All right, I'll do it without the summary first. Let me go back to the other page. What was it? One blog post. If you go down here, right, and you reload this, here's details. You see that? Notice that it doesn't show the content until you click, right? And it shows it, hides it, and shows it, right? Again, something that you used to need a plugin to do this, right? It's now currently natively supported in the new version of HTML5. By default, the label is details, or you can provide what's called a summary. Again, a new element that you can give it like a title, right, for the content, like a header. Right, this is the summary. Right, so if you refresh, notice that now, right, this is the header for the hidden content, right? So you click, you notice that it pushes everything down. Again, I just wanted to just show you how HTML5, right, has included a lot of the use cases that were natively that you used to need a plugin for this. We have videos also are now natively supported by dedicated elements. We have 2D and 3D animation and drawing that are now also natively supported. I mean, it's quite a lot of things. We have a small database even in the browsers, right? So you can store data on the browser, right? And you can query it with a pseudo SQL-like language, right? So it's like cookies on steroids, right? You can not just strings, but you can store objects. You can store things that you can query. I mean, HTML5 is pretty big. We will continue throughout the semester introducing new concepts, right? This is only the beginning, right? Again, go try to get your system up and running, deploy it, and start working those experiments. All right. Thank you.